G'day race fans. Formula One is brutal. One bad season, sometimes a run of bad races, and your career can be over. Today we're ranking every driver on the Formula One grid by how much pressure they're under heading into the 2026 season. Some drivers have nothing to lose, others are fighting for legacy, seats, or even their entire future in the sport. We'll be using 4 pressure tiers. Here they are. Low pressure, very little to lose. Moderate pressure, important but not career defining. High pressure, expectations are real, margin for error is small. And maximum pressure, careers, legacies, or seats are generally at risk. Now, before we start, if you do enjoy this content and want to help us push towards our 500 subscriber target, pressure's on you. Hit that like button and subscribe. It really will help us out. Now, let's get started with a massive one, someone under max pressure, one of the biggest names on the grid, and that is Lewis Hamilton. This is clearly a career-defining season for Lewis. Last year at Ferrari was deeply disappointing. It wasn't just the results, but the comparison of performance to his teammate, Charles Leclerc. Charles took poles, he took podiums, and across most weekends he had the upper hand. Yes, Lewis was new to the team, and yes, Ferrari is Leclerc's home, but the adaptation simply didn't happen fast enough. And we know Lewis didn't go to Ferrari to be second best. Now, there are a lot of people that say that the ground effect cars just didn't suit Lewis Hamilton's driving style. That excuse can no longer be applied if, again, he has a substandard season. And I believe if he does have a substandard season, he may just walk away from the sport. So regardless whether that car is competitive or not, he needs to outperform Leclerc, and that is going to be no easy task. Moving on to the other side of the spectrum with low, and I'm going to go with 4-time world champion Max Verstappen. If it isn't a very successful season by his own standards, whether that's from driver output or whether the car's not competitive, he is still going to be one of the most wanted drivers on the grid. So should he want to walk away at the end of the season, there are plenty of teams that will throw the checkbook at him. Now, moving on, let's go with the Argentinian. And that is, of course, Franco Colapinto. There he is. Now I'm going to put Franco in max pressure. Clearly make or break season. It feels like Franco has been around for a long time, but remarkably, this is his first truly stable season. And Alpine have made it pretty clear they are backing him fully, and that is great. But it also means there are no excuses. We've seen flashes of speed, we've seen potential, but now with 2026, he needs to deliver, because if he doesn't, where does he go next? So this is a high pressure moment. Now I'm going to go with our Aussie driver, Oscar Piastri. I'm going to fence sit him here between moderate and real, but you've got to remember Oscar is no longer the young guy with potential. Last year, he won 7 races. He led the championship for a long stretch and matched Lando Norris throughout most of the season. This season is a big one because now the expectations on Piastri are even greater. And obviously with all the talk of being a future world champion, the pressure does increase by expectation. Esteban Ocon, huge season for Ocon. Last year was disappointing by his standards. And the team, it just seemed to me, were increasingly looking more excited about Ollie Behrman's future. Yes, there was some bad luck and strategy didn't always help, but this is year 10 in Formula One for Ocon, and he needs to be that team leader. He cannot allow Behrman to establish himself as number one. So this does feel like a genuine crossroads season for Esteban. Now let's go with one of the second-year drivers, and that's Kimi Antonelli, and I'll fence sit him here alongside Oscar. The thing is, with second-year drivers, they can no longer rely on the whole rookie leniency. And Mercedes is a high-pressure seat. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Now, we know Toto Wolff and Mercedes have definitely invested a lot of time into Kimi Antonelli's development. I think it's a great team for him to be in. But this season, there cannot be those type of lulls that he had in his first season. Notably, the European leg where he just basically went off the boil. So they'll be expecting a lot more consistency out of Kimi. And of course, he's still young. There's still a lot of pressure on his shoulders being at that Mercedes work team. Now, Nico Hülkenberg, one of the experienced heads, I'm going to put him into the moderate bracket. Sauber has now become Audi. they will be wanting momentum, and they want that momentum fast. Hulkenberg is the experienced head guiding a manufacturer project into the new regulations. So there is plenty of responsibility, and that carries a lot of pressure. But this is exactly the role he was hired for, and I think he'll be quite comfortable in that role. Now, Sergio Perez, he's hit the headlines lately. Where is old Sergio? I'm going to put him in the real bracket. I think there's a lot of pressure here, and quite a lot of it is possibly on his own making with some of these public comments coming from podcasts. Look, he has a lot of unfinished business clearly from the Red Bull days. It's going to mean performance matters immediately at Cadillac, especially with Bottas alongside him. He needs to let the driving do the talking now, because it seems to be the opposite way, or the other way around currently. So big one for Checo, because there's a lot to prove. Now, moving on to Carlos Sainz, the smooth operator, straight into low. Look, Carlos looked happy. And it was a tough exit from Ferrari, but he settled in at Williams very nicely. He finished that season strongly last year. He has interests across the grid, and he's driving, by the looks of it, with a lot of freedom. And I think that is a dangerous combination for someone with that talent. I think Vowles is happy there. He's happy with Albon. It's a very tight-knit team. Potentially a competitive car this year. Carlos is going to thrive. Lance Stroll. Now, do I put Lance even on the grid? Look, I'm just going to say low pressure. Lance is interesting because realistically, he has a very secure seat, but there is a wild card, and that wild card is Adrian Newey, the new team principal. If Aston Martin produces a competitive car, expectations rise, and Newey won't be afraid to upset the status quo. Now, I think with Lance, people don't give him enough credit. I think he is a lot better than what people give him credit for. The issue with him is most likely his attitude. It just seems to be that if the car is not very competitive, he just tends to check out. So maybe with a competitive car, he may just apply himself and we may see a better Lance Stroll. But tough gig. He's got Fernando Alonso right next to him, who quite consistently has outperformed him throughout their years together. Now, let's go with the only rookie on the grid, and that is Arvid Lindblad. And I'm going to put him in the real bracket. Now, for Arvid Lindblad, he has come into Red Bull at perhaps one of the best times for any Red Bull driver. No more pressure from Helmut. No more pressure from Christian. It looks like under the leadership of Mekis and, of course, at Racing Bull's Permain, all those days of volatility at Red Bull have long gone. I think they'll be a lot more patient with Arvid. Now, we did see glimpses of speed and some brilliance in his F2 season. We know he's been talked about for a long time. There's a lot of expectation on the kid. He is going to be molded much like Antonelli at Mercedes. I think he is the gem to polish. Big season, of course, but he comes in to a far more patient Red Bull. Now, moving on, let's go with Isaac Hadjar. Much like Arvid Lindblad, a great opportune time to be promoted. But still, there is a lot of expectation on young Isaac's shoulders. He's going to be watched very closely in performance to Max Verstappen. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. There's been plenty of pressure on that second Red Bull seat. But I think with Isaac, he has got a lot of mental strength. He's very resilient, and he is going over to Red Bull, I think, with the right mindset. It isn't necessarily about beating Max Verstappen. It's about going over there, trying to learn off Max, and over time, get better. Now, let's go with another second-year driver, and that is Ollie Behrman. Tough one. I would like to fence sit him, maybe revisit. With Ollie, we know he has a lot of talent. But I think where a lot of pressure comes from is now the expectation, but also the roadmap. So he is clearly, I think in most people's eyes, the next guy that steps up into Ferrari. And he must be getting a little excited when you look at the discontent of Charles Leclerc from last year, as well as the performance of Lewis Hamilton. There could potentially be a seat at Ferrari in 2027. I believe he will be a driver over there in 27, but let's see. But that expectation and that roadmap of Ferrari could be quite a pressure cooker. And we know he needs to be more consistent, eliminate a lot of those rookie errors that he had last year. But I think he'll be all good for it. Albon. Oh, tough one for Albon. I would like to fence sit him, but I'm going to go moderate at the moment. Now, Albon, for me, I still believe the jury's out on his mental toughness of what we saw at Red Bull. I've explained it plenty of times. He's had quite an easy ride at Williams with, you could say, substandard drivers next to him, but now Sainz is there. Now, Albon, it was a tale of two coins, wasn't it? Two sides. Great start to the season last year, but then massively fell away. And then Sainz really stepped up his game. So a lot of pressure on Albon to make sure he starts off 2026 on the right foot. But I think what does help him is that Vowles is very patient. Vowles is very happy with the team itself, with both of his drivers. From that aspect, they will definitely support him if he does step into the season a little underwhelming. Okay, one of my favorite drivers, Liam Lawson, the Kiwi. Fence sitting here, a lot of pressure. This is a crossroads year. Plenty of cameos in 23 and 24, promotion, demotion, and a lot of chaos. But Liam finally has stability, and I think that is going to help massively. But it also means there's nowhere to hide. He has a rookie teammate, which can be dangerous if Lindblad is extremely fast. But if Liam can deliver this season, his career opens up massively. If it doesn't, I think the options shrink quite quickly. There's big pressure. Yes, more patience over there at Red Bull, but they'll be expecting him to lead that team in 2026. Okay, Pierre Gasly. Now for Pierre, I'm just going to throw him straight and low. He's just recently signed that multi-year contract at Alpine. He is clearly the number one driver. He had some good results last year, despite a car that wasn't the best on the grid. But there will be expectation for him to lead the team, of course. If that car is competitive, well, then obviously the pressure goes up a lot more as there's more expectation on him. But I think at this point in time, low bracket seems to work quite well. Fernando Alonso, mate, just get him straight there into that low bracket. Fernando, possibly the last season for him. It's been crazy how many races. I mean, it's over 400 races. I think he entered Formula One, if I'm right, in, was it 2001? A long time ago, regardless. And it is crazy to think this year, 2026, it was 20 years ago that he won his last world championship with Renault back in 2006. Look, there's no pressure on the wily old fox. He may hang around if Aston Martin can provide a very competitive car. But if it isn't, I think he will basically walk away from the sport and maybe go into some other form of racing that he does enjoy. Valtteri Bottas. Now I'm going to put him over here in the moderate bracket. There is pressure, and I think there's pressure for any driver that has been away from the sport for a year, because there is plenty of expectation that he can help Cadillac get that team up and running quick. I think he's quite professional at what he does. And the good thing is he's been around the paddock even last year with his services over at Mercedes. So I think he's still, within the circus as opposed to Checo on the outside coming back. Mate, he will need to get up to speed very, very quickly. Gabby Bortoleto, second year. I'm going to put him fenced. I might revisit. Again, one of those rookies that showed a lot of glimpses of talent. We know he's good. He's got good pedigree. Former F3 and F2 champion. Like, he's managed by Fernando Alonso. He gets on well with Max Verstappen, so he can call on to some experienced heads for some good advice. Big season, because again, like these rookies of last year, they cannot hide behind the inexperienced excuses that rookies make. We did see his form ebb and flow quite a bit through the season. Now, Audi, there is pressure now, because if you look at Kick Sauber, it wasn't one of the teams that had a lot of limelight and spotlight. But now with a proper manufacturer backing the team, things get a whole lot more serious, and they'll be expecting Gabby to be a far more consistent driver through 2026. So more expectations there, more pressure. All right, we've got three classy drivers here, and I am going to go with Charles Leclerc. Now, look, Charles, he is one of the hottest properties in Formula One. So if you wanted to walk away from Ferrari, like Max, plenty of teams will throw that checkbook, no doubt about it. I think where his pressure comes from is probably more internally, like on himself. Is he losing patience over at Ferrari? Because based on 2025 and some of those post-race interviews, well, things were getting a little bit more spicy, weren't they? And Leclerc was definitely projecting a lot more of his emotion. We'll go George Russell. And George, well, I'll make some room here. I like fence sitters. It's hard. Because the thing with George, he's so comfortable and he seems so comfortable in his skin. He's very high IQ driver, very driven, very team focused. Whereas interesting with George is obviously his contract, which is a 1+1. Naturally, the +1 comes from, apparently, as reported, based on performance targets. If he hits them this year, then his 2027 contract will be automatically activated in his favor. That will bring a certain element of pressure on him, particularly if, maybe if the car's not that great or he starts off the season relatively bad. But I think George, he'll be fine. But there is pressure. Look, it is a Mercedes works team. There is pressure regardless in that team. And let's finish off with the reigning world champion, Lando Norris. Now, this is an interesting one. Clearly, for a while, he had the reputation as being the bottler. I think he has completely shed that. In fact, it was probably more overstated, in all honesty. But is he the kind of guy that is so driven that wants to be remembered in history with a legacy and in record books? No, he's not. He's made that pretty clear. And I just think getting that world championship off his back, he's done it. There were expectations when he was younger because, everyone knew he was a great young talent. Well, he's hit the Everest. So maybe he drives with so much more calmness and maybe we see an even better Lando Norris this year. On the flip side, there's expectation. If you are a champion, you become a victim of your success. Everyone will expect race wins and high performance. So with that, that's the other flip side of the pressure. Oh, I could fence sit him. I really could. But for now, I'll hit him in the moderate bracket. So there we go. Looking at that, that's where I'll probably sit. Do I want to revisit any of these? Naturally, I probably would. But I think we'll leave it at that. Unfortunately, we couldn't get Mick's input on this one. He's currently enjoying a holiday in Europe. The internet was not playing ball and we could not get a clear connection to record. So had to roll solo today. Hopefully he'll be ready for the next one. But going back on pressure, it is not static. It will change or ebb and flow throughout the season. It is very dynamic. If any of these guys get a stronger than expected car, well, then the expectations of results jumps up significantly. If anyone has a bad start to the season, bang, the pressure increases. Momentum ebbs and flows. It's going to happen. But it is clear there are multiple drivers on the grid facing a decisive season. And that's one thing that will make this season extremely fascinating. So let me know where you disagree. Let's fight about it in the comments. I love the engagement. And until the next one, we'll catch you then.